and really begin to consider yourself not fragile, but anti-fragile. Being anti-fragile means I took a difficult situation and utilized it to actually leverage me to better things, versus saying, as a result of that, I'm sort of this victim and it hurt me. So by challenging yourself and building that confidence that I can overcome and do more than I thought I could, it's a very powerful way to handle all of the future pandemic type things that we will face.
I'd like to introduce you to the show, Dr. Ben Lerner. Dr. Lerner is a two-time New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and Christian Booksellers Association best-selling author with millions of books sold. His more than 20 books, curriculum, and programs are in multiple languages and have been utilized in tens of thousands of corporations, churches, schools, and sports teams in countries all over the world. His works include compiling and being the executive director for 2 Bibles for Billion Soul initiatives, where he has been the chairman of Global Wellness for over 15 years. A former college All-American wrestler himself, he was first named as a chiropractor and wellness advisor for the USA Wrestling World Team in 1995. During that, he traveled with USAW to the Atlanta, Sydney, London, and Rio Olympic Games, as well as 8 world championships. Dr. Ben has personally worked as a doctor, nutrition, and fitness specialist for the NBA, Major League Baseball, USA Judo, USA Weightlifting, the NFL Alumni Association, and the LGPA. Impressive. He has a bachelor's in nutrition, a master's in psychology, is a chiropractor, an advanced personal trainer, and with advanced certifications in corporate and life coaching, and is right now pursuing his PhD in business administration and has nearly wrapped that up. He has opened up more than 1,000 franchises, manufactured over 24 healthcare products, and is consulted for over 3,000 healthcare corporate clients. After selling his company, Dr. Ben has launched the Ultimate Impact Group, which is really an amalgamation of 9 different companies that utilize his 25 years as business, franchising, healthcare, real estate, and product manufacturing. It is an honor and a privilege to have Dr. Ben Lerner on the show today. All right, Dr. Ben, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for having yourself on. It's an honor to spend a little bit of time with you today.
Well, it's great to be with you. Of course, this is how we converse every day now, so it doesn't even feel like a show. It just feels like we're hanging out.
It does. Dr. Ben and I are not strangers to Zoom meetings. I'm actually working with him right now on a few projects, and he's actually in the process of coaching me through some health aches and pains that I'm dealing with. As you heard in the intro, Dr. Ben really transcends really all the areas that this podcast tries to focus on, which is you've got the health bucket and fitness bucket, you've got the mindset bucket, you've got the fitness bucket, and the love and relationship bucket, which it's not something that is we highlighted in his bio, but as a man of faith and as a family man, it's certainly something that I'm sure we could spend the entire podcast talking about. So again, thanks for coming on. Let's first, Dr. Ben, tell us a little bit about the Ultimate Influence Group. It's sort of how we ended the intro. It's sort of, as you say, it's the amalgamation of all your businesses, which at times it can be somewhat overwhelming with everything that you've done and all that you do. I'm not even sure where to take this conversation because there's so much value that you can provide.
Yeah, this all started, I was insanely into health and fitness as an athlete in high school and college, but also watching my parents really struggle with their health. My mom and dad were, if you've ever seen somebody lighting the next cigarette from the previous cigarette, I never saw them without a cigarette in their mouth, overweight, not really into health at all. My dad died 2 years younger than I am right now, which is kind of a startling revelation every time I say it. My mother had a stroke in her 40s after my dad had died. So I looked at that growing up and said, that won't be me. And eventually I want to stop that from happening to other people. So I became a chiropractor. I got my bachelor's in nutrition. I wrote a New York Times best-selling book on health and wellness back in the year 2000. And then it went from there to, well, if I want to really get this message out there, I'm going to have to also learn the business. So eventually learned enough to open up 125 franchises, and then just to keep evolving the business in order to get this message and the products and everything out there that was going to really make a difference in the world. So that's where it gets sort of to be a little schizophrenic, because I'm a doctor with a background in nutrition, psychology, now getting my PhD in business, and then growing a lot of different businesses, all designed for this mission of saving the world.
Which is a big mission, right? So, and one that you're slaying currently, I have to say, just being a participant in your social media, seeing all your blogs, and having the opportunity to work with you on some of these projects has been a blessing in my life, because it's given me an opportunity to get closer to you and to learn from somebody who's done all of these things. So, I think let's talk about the journey in a little bit greater depth, because the reality is everyone in life, we're going through a journey, right? And we're going somewhere, and some of us have a clear purpose and a clear vision of where we want to take our business, our relationships. You want to change things as we get there. And I remember seeing a picture which says, it's got 2 dots, and it says where you are today, and then it says like success. And then the line in between is this, there's a straight line, there's a big X through it, but it's all over the place. So I would imagine that as you've gone through this journey, you have gone in a certain direction, but then all of a sudden you've pivoted because something else has come across your plate, being involved with an opportunity that led you to another. In fact, that's how you and I had actually met, was in that very same situation. So talk about that a little bit, and the usefulness in that process of change, of being able to pivot like that.
Yeah, I think it's really important for everybody to keep their mind open to what they're capable of and what their potential could be, because I got out of school, again, with my background, I just wanted to help people build a nice local office and right off into the sunset. That was the idea, getting out of college. And I did. I built a really great practice in Kissimmee, Florida, about 7 minutes from Disney. Mickey Mouse was literally one of my patients. I just can't tell you who he or she was. But then all of a sudden, the hockey stick was, unfortunately, my dad had a heart attack, and I realized it's not enough to just keep what I do to my local community. This is happening all over the world, and I believe I could prevent it. So then I decided to write a book. Somebody encouraged me to get a book because that could get the message out there in a greater way. And this book called Body by God, it caught on fire. It became a New York Times bestseller, became a bestseller in Australia, Canada. They created a Chinese version. So suddenly I'm traveling the world teaching wellness. Again, that wasn't the plan, but this tragedy turned into triumph, if you will. And suddenly I had this other work I was doing. And then I thought, well, then how can I really multiply this type of service and these types of products that we were providing our patients and education? So then I created a licensing and franchise model. So that got really big too. We ended up with 125 franchises and 500 licensees. And so it continues to the point, like even where you recognize things like air quality. So I had a good friend of mine died from cancer that we determined was from the air. So you and I are working on a company called Secure Air as a solution to what's happening with air quality, whether now it be COVID or now and beforehand, when we worried about volatile organic compounds and people getting diseases from their homes just based on what they were breathing in. So, it just keeps evolving, and then you have to keep learning.
Yeah. I mean, it's your story is incredible, because all the different opportunities that have come about, and it sounds like, you talked about a minute, that hockey stick growth really starting with, we'll back up for a minute with the passing of your father. And for those who are watching this versus listening to it, you can see Dr. Ben looks like he's about 24 years old. But I will tell you, he's 54 years old. And I've had the opportunity to be with him in his presence personally. Just an incredibly fit and yoked guy. I mean, he is completely shredded. And you talk about, God, who's the P90X dude? What's that guy's name? Tony. Yeah. Tony Horton, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tony Horton I think he's like 60 something. And another guy that people look at that, like, what is this guy doing to look that way and to be that fit? and your approach to fitness is clearly working, and your approach to wellness is clearly working. And I'll share a little bit personally about what you're putting me through at the moment. But with the passing of your father, talk a little bit more about the impact that had, where you were at that point, and really how that acted as somewhat of a catapult for you to sort of take it to the next level. Talk a little bit greater depth, and really how hard that was at that time.
Yeah, so for me and my brothers, we all got into health and fitness just watching our parents take lousy care of themselves. And I was named after my grandfather I never met, and then my kids never met my dad. So everybody was, dying young. And a big mindset shift, again, for everybody listening or watching, is that it's not this idea that you turn 40 and now you're old, or you turn 50 and now you're old. That's something we have to break free from, because if you take care of yourself, really 50 is, as they say, the new 20. And I do, like I do a lot of endurance racing and all kinds of different competitions. And you see these guys 80, 90 years old, these men and women crushing a marathon, or, ripping off an, Olympic distance or half Ironman. And, you could see that it's not about age. It's just about how well you're taking care of yourself. I had a patient of mine who had a heart attack at 52, similar to the same age as my dad. And he decided from that point moving forward, since he did survive it, that he was going to get stronger every year afterwards. And we would all go to the gym. So he was now 92 when I was taking care of him. Wow. We'd go meet him at the gym, and he'd set like a squat record, or he'd set his bench record at 92 years old. So that's something that I'm really big about. Every year I want to set some new record, or get back to, like right now I'm trying to get my bench press back over 300 pounds like it was in high school. And, you think at first, well, you can't do that. You're over 50. That's not possible. But then as you realize, as you get into it and you do it right and you take good care of yourself, it's amazing. You can accomplish these things. I'm well on my way to that 300-pound bench press again, because of just the fact that the body is incredibly resilient. It heals, and you can keep getting more fit and healthy as you age. So I think that, first of all, from a health and fitness perspective and the mindset, that was the biggest thing I think I've changed in watching what happened with my dad.
And I think it's a tremendous lesson to share with everybody, is that, it started upstairs, right? It started with your mindset and the belief that at 54, you could be back to having that conversation, like, what's your bench max, bro? Right? I mean, that was, remember that back in high school? That was
to get back to that.
Like, I can't wait till I see you again. You're like, what's your max? Right? I can't. Right. So it's funny. I just put a whole squat rack and cage down in my basement, and I'm just in the process of doing the same thing, getting back into old school bench pressing. I went dumbbells for many years, but now I'm going back to the bench. So now I got a little something I got to chase. So next time we get together, we can just pull out the bar in your garage and rip off the bench max.
We're definitely maxing next time I come to your house.
So for some of the older listeners, yeah, that was what we talked about. What was your bench max, bro? So a point being, it starts upstairs, right? And you in order to affect the physical, you need to change the mental and the internal dialogue and conversations that people are having with themselves. To what you said about, I'm 40 and I'm old. I mean, just walk into Spencer Gifts or any card section at Target, and you see the 40 over the hill cards, and it's just the way it goes. And I used to feel that way when I was 25, like, man, when I'm 40, I'm going to be old. But now I keep raising that bar and raising that limit, and it starts with your mind. Now, let's be honest.
Because I know you get this when you're at a triathlon, and you've got, for those that haven't been in a triathlon, you have to write your age on your calf. And I used to actually enjoy watching the guy that with the calf that said 61 going by me 27 miles an hour on his bike, because I maxed out at about 23, 24. So if you're doing 27, you're going by me. I'd see that 61. I'm like, you go, dude. That's me one day.
Exactly. It's always amazing to see, like, the 92-year-old guy that you talked about, that it just still setting the bar, raising the bar. But again, it starts upstairs. And so help people battle with that conversation, because I'll be honest, I battled with that conversation myself personally lately, which we'll discuss a little bit. As I started to have, as an endurance athlete, I could eat whatever I wanted, right, and not get overweight, right. So I never associated eating food with like I was doing anything bad. Although my diet I thought was clean, it really wasn't. And because I've always exercised incessantly, I stayed lean, stayed fit. But that's has started to catch up with me, right? So then I start to have these aches and these pains, and then I start to skip a workout, and then I start to lower my bar a little bit, as some of the nutritional choices that I've made have put me to where I'm at. So I think a lot of people are in my boat that are listening right now, right? They feel a certain way. Give us hope on where we need to start that journey. I'm in that journey with you right now, which we'll discuss. But I want you to help people, give them hope as far as how they can that they can be whatever they want to be physically and mentally.
Yeah, three quick things as a doctor. One is the fact that when somebody says, I've got arthritis on my knee because, this left knee, has been bothered for a while because I'm 50. I'm like, really? How old is the right knee? The right knee's doing fine.
Good point.
So it's not age. Obviously something went wrong. And if something went wrong, there's a possibility of correcting it and getting it to heal again. So people don't realize you can heal even after 30, 35, 40 years old. And so a lot of the second part here to what I'd share is this idea that, oh no, I'm after 40, that hurts. I'm going to carry this around the rest of my life. And that's a very common gut reaction or reflex. And it's because past generations did just sort of age poorly. So I remember my dad, couldn't play basketball with us once he was 35, and asked Mom, why can't Dad play basketball? And well, he's 35. How could he be expected to be out there playing basketball? He's an old man. And so you start to learn that aging equals decaying and the inability to participate in your hobbies anymore, and certainly do anything like lift weights or run or anything like that. So you have to kind of relearn that. And that's kind of why, again, I love those marathons and those triathlons and watching older people and saying to myself, okay, so that's what's possible after 50, 60, 70, and 80, not this idea that I got to put my teeth in a jar by the time I'm 40, because teeth just run out by the time you're 40. They only got 40 years in them. Last thing I'll just share is that, the pain and suffering is often these hidden little things. Like you just mentioned, just because you're thin doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. Just because you think you're eating well, like for example, somebody might say, well, I eat all whole grain bread. And as you and I know, it could have gluten in it, other preservatives, grains create inflammation. So a lot of people need a revelation or a new plan when it comes to what is really good nutrition or what is really the right way to exercise, or other issues that they have to address with supplementation. There are things that you're not doing that are the reason that you're starting to feel like you're getting older. It's not just because you're getting older.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who have those aches and pains, right? Their knee starts to hurt, their hip starts to hurt. And that's great about how old is your other knee. That's awesome. And I mean, that just punches them right between the eyes, right? To your point, right? So, it's really the accumulation of bad habits and trying to identify what those habits are, whether it be what you're eating, maybe it's your running form, maybe it's you're not getting enough sleep, all under this sort of bubble of what we'll call wellness, that a clinician like yourself can use to, you need to dissect to try to figure out what the problem is and then correct it. And then you spoke about the body's amazing resiliency to heal when you stop doing the wrong things over and over again. But the key is identifying it. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know you are a man that is involved in working for or part owner of a variety of health and wellness businesses. It's impressive. And if you were to walk into my kitchen right now and see the stack of supplements that are sitting right there, it's a testament to one of the businesses that you're involved in. So just from an overall, because I'm a firm believer, but a lot of what we put in our body, it will yield what we get out of it, right? So for those that are experiencing pain, aches, some of those things that you get when you start to get older, as we are a giant lump of food that is accumulated over time. And I think I'm a good example of somebody that has always made fitness a priority. But here I am having all these issues. Why? Why should this guy? Why is Derek hurting? I shouldn't be, but I am. And kind of walk through our journey that we're going through together right now in context of how you can help somebody get better.
Yeah, and if you go to my house, we have cabinets full of supplements. It looks like we're actually like our own GNC, and that's not to mention the drawers that are full of supplements. And we take them all. So my daughter, who's 18, my wife, and I, we go through a lot of supplements. We've got my younger teenager on a line of supplements, and then even my son, who lives in Denver, Colorado, we ship him supplements every month. So we also eat what we're cooking. Probably two quick things that I think I can get across right here that could help people. Like in your case, we're dealing with inflammation. So I was an Olympic team doctor from 1995 to 2016, and athletes would say, I'm injured, so I can't compete because my knee is injured or my shoulder's injured. But when you test it, you don't necessarily find any particular problem on the X-ray or the MRI. But once we change their diet and begin to address levels of inflammation, suddenly a chronic knee problem is gone. So it wasn't really any legitimate damage. It was just inflammation in the body. So a lot of our aches and pains come from continual levels of inflammation. And so for me to keep going like I do with the way I train and the way I, like I said, trying to get my bench press up to 300 again, all I have to do is eat like some bread or some pasta, and I couldn't do it because that would generate a ton of inflammation in my system. And I'd feel those old wrestling injuries and those old football injuries, all of that stuff would start to come back because of inflammation. Not to mention, chronic inflammation is what leads to autoimmune disease, heart disease, cancer, and it's what makes you susceptible to actually getting really sick or even dying from something like COVID, because inflammation is generally part of the immune process. So if your body's in a state of inflammation, you come across the virus, that inflammation spikes. We've all heard of the cytokine storm. The cytokine storm is the inflammatory storm that if it rages out of control, something like COVID could really kill you quick. But before COVID, it was already an issue with every other type of condition and disease. And inflammation is very directly tied to your diet, specifically when it's made up when you have a diet made up of grains and sugars, foods that your body's allergic to, artificial foods, fried foods. These things generate a lot of inflammation. So virtually every condition you can be suffering from and any pain that you're in could simply be from diet, even though you've called it a disease or that you've gotten old.
Yeah. And it's funny. Inflammation is something, it's one of those things where there's good inflammation and there's bad inflammation, right? So we're talking about the bad inflammation right now. And so for those listening personally, over the last year, I've gone through this chronic cascading inflammation that just sort of, proliferated through my body. So to sort of Ben's example, old injuries, right? I had torn ligaments in my thumb. I had a dislocated shoulder playing football in high school, a right knee issue, and issues with like my hips. And it just started to accumulate over time, and it got worse and worse and worse. And through chiropractic care, through some stretching, through changing my mattress, some of it improved, but it still seemed to get worse and worse. And it wasn't until actually New Year's Eve this year that I realized a light bulb went off, and I was like, maybe it's what I'm eating. Right? Maybe the food I'm putting in my mouth is dictating how I feel and causing this inflammation. So that's when I started on this journey with you, where which I'd like you to speak about, where, okay, here's somebody that is otherwise healthy, that is having issues with inflammation. How do we identify what that is? And then how do we treat it thereafter? And maybe speak a little bit about some of the supplementation that you recommend in the company that you work for that provides the great supplementation of a high degree of quality, which I think is important for people to understand about supplementation, because some stuff out there is just snake oil and pixie dust.
Yeah, so part of the issue almost everybody's heard this by now, is the gut. So everybody's becoming familiar with this term, the biome or the microbiome, which is that we're made up of millions of organisms. We have more organisms in our body than we do genes. And these organisms make up our biome. And this balance of our microbiome, this internal ecology, particularly within the gut, that balance is really important. So it's hard to imagine that anyone has a healthy microbiome because if you've taken antibiotics, you help to ruin the biome. The problem is our food has antibiotics in it. So if you're eating meat, chicken, cow, pork, these animals, if they're raised commercially, they get given a lot of medications, which eventually become a part of us. We always say, you're not just the meat you eat, you're what your meat eats. So if the animal's been fed the wrong products or been injected with a lot of other chemicals, you're actually getting those in your body. There's also glyphosate. So glyphosates, that's the Roundup that we've heard a lot about that's been used in all of our soils and farms. Well, glyphosates are essentially an antibiotic on steroids. So it's a super antibiotic that more aggressively destroys the microbiome than toxins. So we're all radically exposed to toxins. Those damage the gut, as well as any foods you're eating that your body's become sensitive to, what would be known as a food allergy or food sensitivity. That will also disturb the gut lining, create what they call leaky gut or like a bacterial overgrowth or a fungal overgrowth. So with everything I mentioned, since that's all of us, it's hard to imagine that everybody doesn't have a gut issue. And that is really the most foundational part of inflammation. So even if you found when you change your diet, you don't feel any better, we might have to address what's going on in your gut.
Yeah. And so we went through a process together of actually taking a food sensitivity test through a company that you're part of called Vitalio. And they provide an awesome kit, comes to your home. You do the food sensitivity test, and you can also do an inflammation test and check your vitamin D levels. That's something that both my wife and I went through. My wife is terrified of the finger prick, and she was sweating bullets during the entire process, but she made it through and she got her test results. And what was interesting is we found with her, I'll use her for an example right now, is that she has sensitivity to a couple foods that people would otherwise find to be healthy, right? When you look at, if you Google anti-inflammatory foods, blueberries comes up, right? Spinach comes up. But those were two things on her list that cause I believe you call it an IgG response.
Right.
And so she had this, negative response to it. So can you talk a little bit about, the importance of getting those food sensitivity tests, because we're not all the same, right? So when we're dealing with inflammation, we're dealing with the gut, understanding that through that testing.
You can't contain inflammation or improve your gut if you keep eating foods your body's reacting poorly to. And you mentioned IgG. A lot of people are probably familiar with that term because if you've done the antibody test for COVID, you're looking to see if you've got the IgG specific to COVID. So IgGs are these chemicals in your body that are part of your immune system. So if you've got an IgG to, say, a blueberry or spinach, your body's literally treating blueberries and spinach like it's a virus, it's a pathogen, a foreign invader that it doesn't want. So every time you eat blueberries and spinach, your body goes into an inflammatory reaction or an immune reaction to attack that food. So it creates a chronic burden on the immune system if you're eating it regularly, as well as the fact that it keeps you in a chronic state of inflammation. You mentioned there's two kinds of inflammation, one good, one bad. So if you get an injury or you're fighting a virus, you want acute inflammation to attack and heal. But when it's chronic inflammation, when that won't go away, that's when we have a problem. So if you're chronically eating foods you're sensitive to, you're creating this chronic burden to the immune system, chronic inflammation, and there's going to be obviously a bunch of net bad side effects. So the only way to really know which foods those are, you don't necessarily feel these. You have to test for these. My example was I ate almonds every single day because they're known to be incredibly healthy. And I had this massive IgG allergy once I did my test to almonds. And that's no coincidence. So a lot of the foods we eat on a regular basis, those are the foods the body starts to go, wow, this food is invading us on a pretty consistent level. I believe this might actually be an invader, and your body decides to actually start attacking it because we really weren't designed, it's not in our genetics, to eat the same food all the time. That's really due to more modern commercialization of food. If you look historically, there are things that would have been more seasonal. Your diet would have been more rotational. It wouldn't be the same thing day in and day out, which tends to be my nature.
Yeah, I think especially healthy folks, or really anybody, we tend to be creatures of habit, right? So we eat a lot of the same things because they taste good, and we buy the same things at the grocery store, and we get in that routine. So it's interesting when you shared that with me, because every morning my wife and I eat an acai bowl with blueberries, strawberries, and acai berries. Well, when we saw that come back, I was like, no more blueberries for you. It's something that clearly you now seen as an invader, as you said, and we need to restrict that from your diet. So, and then we've now gone on this gut protocol to clean out some of the bad fungus and bacteria and promote the good fungus and bacteria that are in our gut, and to repair that leaky gut. To allow that inflammation to cease. And what's amazing is we've only been on this journey now for what's been a couple weeks. So adjustments to diet, taking out nightshades, and going through this gut repair supplementation process. I've never taken so many pills in my life. In the morning, I feel a little bit like a druggie at first, but I was like, well, these are all supplements. My wife is like, why are we taking all these medications? I'm like, it's not medication. That's different. These are supplements. And I have confidence in working with you that these supplements are of a high quality. And we look at the supplemental industry as a multi-billion-dollar industry. There is a lot of stuff out there that I think people may be taking that may not be in their best interest because they're not getting what they think they're paying for. Can you just talk about that just for a minute, just from a business perspective on the dangers in the supplements that people may be taking too many of?
Yeah, so if you go out and get a supplement from your local grocer or corner drugstore and it's $8 or $5, I've been manufacturing supplements for almost 20 years. And the raw ingredients for those types of nutrients cost more than that. So, that's before you've put it in a pill and put it in a bottle and put a label on the bottle. So for it to be that cheap, there can't possibly be a quality ingredient in there. In fact, I always say two things. One is just flush those vitamins down the toilet and cut out the middleman. And probably you could eat the bottle and get more benefit from it because there's more invested in the bottle and the label than there is in the actual product inside. So it's really better to take nothing or take a high quality supplement because those are toxic and can become a problem over time. It's also good to get one that's recommended. So, we make the products for doctors so that somebody can assess you, make sure you're taking the right things for you because it is different for everybody. And then also obviously monitoring the success and the results and modifying the plan as you go. This idea of Amazon and Walgreens and Publix and all that sort of thing, just kind of taking things here and there, you could probably cause a lot more harm than good.
So I want to shift gears for a second. We've been speaking about health and wellness, how it really starts with your mindset. Then from there, getting a real good assessment and being able to follow a protocol to achieve that optimal health that we all deserve and can have. But we need to believe that it's just like you said, the right knee's 50, but the left knee's working. We have to start to have different conversations with ourselves to elicit that change and believe that it can be done. And then getting connected with the right people, the right companies, taking the right supplements to be able to begin that journey. And I've always been a firm believer that, if you got a sound body, you're going to have a sound mind, and the two really work in synchronicity. As you've gone through your journey, as you've worked with different companies, founded different companies in this health and wellness space, I would imagine that in that journey, you've learned a ton about different products and services that can help that overall health and wellness and starting those businesses and creating those businesses. So as you go through this journey and you're dealing with, you're involved in supplement companies, you're involved with air quality, everything that's around health and wellness, around helping chiropractors develop better practices. You've written books about it. what do you see in your crystal ball as you continue to touch all these things as sort of the next thing in business that's going to have an impact on wellness?
Yeah, there's a book I've been reading called Ask Your Developer, and that what they pointed out when you look at Amazon doesn't deliver brown packages. Amazon makes software that sets up the process for delivering brown packages. They're a software developer, not a store. And so, you realize if you want to get the message out in a major way, then you're going to have to get into software development. So I've become a part of a company called Sela Labs. I'm now their CFO, and we are in the process of already having made 37 portfolio companies through the process of software development to better deploy any products, any services, or any messaging, and really support people for something that's just in their phone or on their computer. So if you're going to really make a difference in the world, and as I said at the start, to save the world, you've got to come up with technological solutions to get the information out there in a much more accessible way and to potentially billions of people at one time. And so that's really been, as this thing continues to evolve, that's been the next step in my journey.
So that's awesome. A very big picture, right? So, as a marketing firm owner, I can respect the importance of people's attention, right? We're all vying for attention, and a lot of that, fortunately and unfortunately, has to do with this thing called our cell phones. Just take a walk through the mall or in the grocery store, and most people have their heads down. So we need to create unique experiences, like you said, where people have the opportunity to engage and learn about certain products that can make an impact in their life. So you were gracious enough to introduce me to the founder of that company, and what a remarkable story that is, and what vision they have to be able to create these portfolios with that sort of Amazon branding sort of mindset. So, from a business perspective, what would you say? What would you attribute your success? Right? I know you play a role with a number of different companies, invest in a number of different companies. You're like I see you as sitting in one of those chairs on Shark Tank. Right, sitting over there next to Mark Cuban, and in between him and Mr. Wonderful, as you work with all these different companies. Every time I talk to you, you're involved with a different company. And so, how has that happened? Because I think a lot of people envy the position that you're in. They want to be in that position as this, multifaceted business person. Like, kind of tell us a little bit of your journey, how you got there, in a little bit greater depth on the business side.
Yeah, I mean, one, if you're going to be Mark Cuban or even way below that, me, you have to have made sure your early work made money. So you have to be able to invest in these things and have the time to play a role in them. If you want to make sure you're not just simply sitting back and kind of passively taking the hit if the company's doing poorly, you're helping it actually progress. Like you can see I'm involved not just as an investor with Secure Air, but part of the operations and helping, work with you to bring this to market, this new product that they're doing. So, so that, you do have to make sure you've come up with a core business strategy that's going to generate cash to invest. But then also my ability to play a role and actually help these companies succeed has been really, and it probably goes back to even my sports background and trying to make an Olympic wrestling team, is you have to just keep getting better. So I'm working on my 4th degree. So I was nutritionist, chiropractor, got those degrees, then got my industrial organizational psychology degree to be able to learn how to build corporations in a healthy way. Now getting my PhD in business administration is that, you have to evolve as a human to be able to make a greater and greater impact. I think we all think we're brilliant, but at some point you do have to go out and learn and develop skill sets if you're going to be able to do more like we're doing.
Yeah, that's a one thing I've always been very impressed with you, is you're always learning, always growing, always improving, and not putting a ceiling on that, right? So here you are getting your PhD in business administration, and that's something that most 54-year-old dudes, the thought of doing online school is terrifying, right? I can't even get my 14-year-old daughter at times to want to do her homework. And here you are, 54, still crushing classes, learning and growing. And I think the lesson to be learned there is you're increasing your value, right? So as you continue to increase your value, your skill sets improve, and it brings more to the table for those would-be businesses to be able to bring you in as a part of their influence. So, we have a lot of people that listen to the show that are interested in marketing and growing their business. So, you sit in an interesting seat in that you're involved in multiple different businesses, which is exciting, especially to those who are interested in marketing. So tell me a little bit about how you would articulate how you've marketed yourself, right? You've learned a lot, you've increased your value, but how does Dr. Ben market himself to get these types of opportunities? Or have you just, I'll stop there. So kind of tell me how have you marketed yourself?
I mean, we're so connected now through, social media and other platforms, but I really am always looking for that next opportunity. So I a lot of times, in fact, even here I am, the CFO of Sela, their lead investor and advisor for the company, working with 37 portfolios. It started with, I saw a product, the first product they produced. I thought, hey, this would be a great one for me to invest in and possibly represent, be like the only representative of this product to the chiropractic profession. So I called Jared, who you met, the founder, and suggested that to him. He's like, man, this is fascinating. He goes, how would you like to play a deeper role in the company? So that whole thing happened from me reaching out because I thought, here's something I could really do a lot with, and I could serve that company and help them. So a lot comes from that. With Secure Air, I wrote a book on cancer. We know a lot of it can come from air quality issues. So I have a certain group I follow of angel investors, and they were all taking a look at this company called Secure Air. I saw what they claimed to be doing. I thought, man, that might be a solution for cancer like I'm looking for. So I sought them out and sat down with them and said, well, if I'm going to be involved, I don't want to just be an investor. I want to play a role. And that's how that happened.
So that's phenomenal. So it sounds like obviously you've increased your value. You've got an amazing resume, and then from there, so you've done the work, right? You've done the proven work, but you personally reached out. You seek a lot of these opportunities out. Introduce yourself with the credentials that you've created through your hard work and years of effort, and that's led down that path. And I would imagine to a certain extent throughout your life and throughout your journey, you've had people that have just come to you based off your experience, the books that you've written, and all that you put out there in terms of marketing yourself.
Yeah, but a lot of people that come to me, they want something. So it's not that's generally not the way it happens. I mean, sometimes it does. And that's usually where like my consulting works. So I do about 15 hours that I bill out a week in consulting. And those are people that through marketing myself. So I'm very consistent with content, as you probably know. So I've got every week we put out 3 articles, videos every single week. We're very consistent. And so I've never had an opening in my 15 hours a week of consultation work that I do. There's always somebody in the wings who, if I remove a client or I move on, there's somebody to step in. And that comes from just never stopping. I do about every 60 days, we do a webinar, and we'll grow our list by another 200-300 through the webinar, who are now getting my content multiple times a week. We also have a text process we've built where we send out a message every Monday to a list that's now at 1,500 people. So we do a lot to keep the word out there, and that alone fuels the consulting hours.
Yeah, your schedule in your calendar, I must imagine, is quite complex with all the different businesses and the priorities that you must stack and manage. I'm just honored that I'm able to grab an hour of your time because I knew you were super busy. And despite how busy you are, you're always out there helping and serving others. And that's what I think I've been most impressed with you is here you are, a successful business person. You've written books, you've done, amazing athletic accolades. Yet when somebody like myself, who I would categorize as, well, we have a business relationship, we have a friendship. I've reached out to you personally to help to ask for help with issues that I've had. And you've always been there, to pick up the phone and to call me back and to help out. And I know you do that for so many people. And I would imagine that's a testament to just, you are a family man, but you're a man of faith, which resonates from you. Can you talk about the importance of faith and how it's played a role? I know you're in a book about it, and how it plays a role in just how you approach your day-to-day life.
Yeah, my moral compass is about people, so I think that goes back to obviously how I got to be a doctor in the first place. I watched my family struggle. I watched, what happens to you when your dad dies young and what that does to everybody around, the family. And so, that I've got a real compassion for people. I'm like an X-man. I'm like an empath when it comes to others. I just really care about people and want to see them, whether it's to see them succeed or see them be healthy or, overcome whatever challenges that they have. So that's a lot of my compass. And, and I believe that it's God that put me here to do that. So, God planted me here to make a difference in the lives of others. And in the end, that it's all working to glorify him, which really creates a lot of, when we set up our companies and as we make decisions, there is again, this compass, and we feel like God is watching. He creates the opportunities for us, but then he also stands by to see how we do with those opportunities and whether or not they truly are there to serve him, save the lives of others, and ultimately, as a Christian, to glorify Christ in the process.
That's outstanding. So, Dr. Ben, what is next for you? Big picture. What is your big picture next goals as we sort of wrap this interview up? What can we expect to see coming from your camp here in these next few years? Because I know you're not slowing down. Aside from 300-pound bench press, what else can we look forward to?
40 straight pull-ups. That's the other one. But
okay, all right. Are we doing like wide grip pull-ups, or are we doing more of the chin-up style?
So I actually go staggered.
Oh, you stagger it. Okay. Yeah. Now, are you going to switch like 20 reps and then switch, or are we going to stick one side?
Yeah, it has to be straight. Now, when I'm working out, I'll switch so that I don't develop oddly, walk around with one big lat or something. But during the actual feats of strength, it'll just be one away. But in addition to that, I built a couple pretty big companies that I exited from, but the goal has always been to do something that really reached the world. And so really with Sela Labs and the portfolios we're developing, the goal of all of that is to really create global companies. We have founders from Australia, the Ukraine, England, and to create projects that can really touch the world in a positive way at a time when certainly the world needs it. And so that's really been the reason for learning, the reason for exiting, getting involved with Sela and Secure Air. We have a joint venture in Asia, ways to touch the planet because the planet badly needs people who care about it.
Agreed. Last two questions. We've been talking now for about 45 minutes. What would you want the listeners to take away? If there's just one thing they were to take away from the conversation, the things you've discussed today, or maybe it's something you haven't even mentioned that you feel would make the biggest impact on their life or the world as it relates to changing something in their life?
Yeah, this would probably also be relevant just to the time we're in, right? Because everything's sort of in the context of a global pandemic and masks and all the things that go with it. There's a term that we learned when I was getting my master's in psychology called resiliency. And in those studies, they showed that when people went through these events, whether it be something like, a 2008 financial crisis, or you've been to war, in the Middle East, or now we're dealing with a pandemic, 9/11, you go through these serious emotional and traumatic events that affect you economically and your relationships, at home and at work, that the resilient people actually tend to leverage it. It becomes like jet fuel for them, their lives and their careers. So a third of the people actually look back and say, the reason for all my successes was because I had a challenge. And you mentioned that at the beginning with, here I am now, here's success and the bumpy road to get there, that if you're resilient, then those are the people that, again, a third of them do really well. And the other 2/3 are like, have a good excuse for failing. And the problem is it's a tough world, and we're going to have to really be good at mastering change because there's a lot of volatility. So what you don't want to be is you don't want to be fragile. So if there's a box that you're shipping somewhere and it's stamped fragile, that box does poorly with volatility. It does poorly with a bumpy ride. And life is a friggin' bumpy ride, and it's only gotten bumpier and is likely to still be challenging. I really get concerned with people who are waiting to get past all of this, It's like, I don't know that there is a past all this. I've been doing this for 30 some years. There's always there's always a problem. And so what you don't want to be is fragile. You want to be anti-fragile. You want to be resilient. You want to look for opportunities and know that the circumstances, the environment, don't influence whether or not you'll succeed. So it's not aging, whether we're talking about our health. It's not who the new president is. It's not the pandemic. It's not the economy. You decide whether or not you're going to be healthy and successful in life. Don't let things outside you make that decision for you, or you're likely going to be, to kind of use the Rocky thing, life is, the world is a mean and nasty place. And so if you can't, get hit and keep moving forward, you're going to struggle to make this one trip we got around this earth. We're going to have trouble making it a good one.
Yeah, a couple follow-ups to that, because that's such a powerful statement that you just made right there. In that, a couple of things come to mind. One is you need to hold yourself accountable. Is from what I'm hearing is stop blaming the situation for where people are. Like I said, 2/3 of people will use it as an excuse, and 1/3 of people will use it as a catapult for success. And having the resilience to have the mindset to get through that and to frame that situation in a positive way so that you can use it as a catapult. But again, it all, I think, starts upstairs with how we frame the situation, right? And that's with any challenging situation or any situation that change is, invoked. It's not something that we chose to do. It was sort of slapped on our plate, right? And that's, we use COVID as an example, everyone that was slapped on our plates. So with that said, do you see benefit in people intentionally doing challenging things to try to elicit that change, to put themselves in those difficult situations with intent, knowing that it's going to elicit that resiliency response, so that when they are slapped in the face with something challenging, they're like, I got this. We'll use Ironman triathlon for an example. That's why some people do that, and that makes a 5K seem like nothing, but 300-pound bench presses, just using examples of things like that in their life. Is that something you regularly practice and you feel that helps you with that resilience that you just spoke about?
Yeah, that's a great takeaway or action step is to challenge yourself. When I've taught camps and these sort of transformational type camps we've taught, we'll have people work out, or, we eat healthy. We do things during the weekend. And I say, you're more capable than you thought you were before you got here. Like, you never thought you could make it through that run. So you could start to actually build confidence in yourself and your own resiliency, and really begin to consider yourself not fragile, but anti-fragile. Being anti-fragile means I took a difficult situation and utilized it to actually leverage me to better things. Versus saying, as a result of that, I'm sort of this victim and it hurt me. So by challenging yourself and building that confidence that I can overcome and do more than I thought I could, it's a very powerful way to handle all of the future pandemic type things that we will face.
Love it. It's such a powerful conclusion to the conversation. That was perfect. I appreciate that insight. And that's such a strong statement. So Dr. Ben, how can people find you? How can they get in contact with you?
But you can go to drbenlerner.com and there's a contact page there if you want to reach out to me. Obviously, any social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, we're everywhere.
Awesome. Dr. Ben, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on the show. And we'll look forward to having you back on here sometime soon.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bless you guys.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Adapt You podcast today. Our goal with this show and all of our content is to deliver you the guests and the respective knowledge necessary to help you change something in your life. Everyone who listens to this show has something they want to affect and something they want to change. And our goal is to help give you the knowledge necessary to take you down that path on becoming the absolute best version of yourself. If you like what you heard today, please tune in to all of our shows and also check us out in social media. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, and check out our website and have some great content on there as well. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next show.